Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of the things that I deal with, especially with a lot of my less experienced clients who aren't used to it taking sometimes a long time to get stronger, because people will run a novice phase and they'll make enormous amounts of strength gains early on, and then when they finish their new gains, or most of them, then they realize, oh my god, it takes a long time. Why can't I put weight on the bar? Why can't I get stronger? And the reason you're not getting stronger is because you have to gain muscle, and gaining muscle is a slow process. Now, you'll get a lot of people who will try to argue with that because they haven't looked closely at the research, all the studies looking at size versus strength, and everything else, and they don't realize that barring a few freakish individuals, and you would know already if you're one of those people, size is generally going to be the biggest determiner of strength relative to your levers, right? So when people say, well, a lot of strength is about leverages, that's true. People with short arms have great leverages for the bench press. People with short legs have great leverages for the squat. People with really long arms, opposite of the bench, have great leverages for the deadlift. You're right, arm and leg lengths. That's what determines the leverages. But when you start accounting for the leverages, all the data we have shows that muscle mass accounts for 90% of your strength, which means all this other training, things like learning to accelerate, neuromuscular efficiency, all this other stuff accounts for about 10% of your strength. So hypertrophy is the largest pathway to raise our strength ceiling. It is the largest pathway. The problem is gaining muscle is a slow process. It's a slow process. And you'll see this a lot with a lot of guys who are like, well, I weigh 170, I want to recomp. Well, don't expect muscle or strength to go up very quickly if you do that. You know, if your average height and you weigh 170 pounds, you don't have a lot of muscle. You don't have a lot of muscle. If you're a short guy, you might. You don't have a lot of muscle. And if you want to actually get stronger, you're going to have to do whatever it takes to facilitate muscle growth. Well, if you're not eating in a calorie surplus and slowly gaining weight, that process is going to be even slower. And I'm not saying it's impossible, because it's certainly possible to recomp. It's very possible to recomp. But understand that the process, if you do that, is going to be very, very slow. So you might be stuck at a 225 bench press, and you think you're going to recomp and get it up to 275. Well, if you do that recomping at a body weight like that, be prepared for a 3 or 4 year journey. Because again, think about it in terms of how much muscle you're having to add. You're going to have to increase the amount of muscle in your pecs, delts, and triceps, right? If you've already been maxing, so you've already got a lot of the neuro gains. Talking about almost a 20% increase in strength. That means you're going to have to get those muscles 20% larger. Well, that can take a long time. Even bulking, that might be 6 months, a year, right? It might be that long. If you're not gaining weight, it's going to be much slower. It's going to be much, much slower. And ultimately, this is the reason why we do rep work, volume work, assistance work, all these things. Because you have to get bigger. You have to get bigger to get stronger. Once you are used to maxing out. And that's the other thing too. As soon as people start using a program that has max effort training, we usually see pretty big jumps, right? We'll see some significant gains and improvements in 1 rep max. But that's because you're practicing doing 1 rep maxes. And 1 rep maxing is a skill. And it's a skill that's not always specific to an individual lift. In other words, if we built all the muscles for you to squat a lot more, and you did all of your maxing with, say, box squats and pin squats and box squats against chains and bands, and you go over and back squat, your back squat's still going to improve because you've still practiced maxing. You've still built intermuscular coordination. But the hypertrophy is going to be required because, again, you can only push those neural pathways so far. Again, if we go back and look at that big squat study that was done, on squat 1 rep max, they looked at everyone from powerlifters to bodybuilders. They actually looked at their form. And they found that, again, they could DEXA scan someone and estimate their squat, and they can get it within 10%. They can DEXA scan someone, and it didn't matter whether they were a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. They could estimate their 1 rep max. Now, people who don't max out tend to be on the lower end of that 10% margin of error. People who max out a lot, practice maxing, tend to be near the higher end of that. Okay, so practicing maxing could in theory put 5 to 10% onto your maxes. But the rest of it's hypertrophy. And that's a patient thing, because again, once you finish those noob gains, or again, you go on your first, how do we put it, on that there cell tech for the first time, you'll see big gains there too, just like you did when you were a novice. Okay, but barring your noob gains, muscle becomes a very slow process, right? It's not that hard to gain 15, 20 pounds of muscle in your first year of training if you do everything right. The training is ideal, nutrition is ideal, sleep is ideal. Yeah, you can do that. But then your next year, it's going to be maybe half. Even if you do everything perfect again, the next year half again. So if you gained 15 pounds of muscle as a noob in your first year, you're looking at 7 to 8 the next year. Then about 3 to 4 pounds the year after that. You're going to see pretty quick diminished returns. You're going to have to be patient. And if you want to get stronger, you're going to have to consistently work on getting bigger. Now, that might be bulking and cutting, might be required. Or you could just slow bulk. Because a lot of guys out there start at a body weight that's way too low for their overall strength goals or their size goals. They could just slow bulk. You could slow bulk for years. Okay, you slow bulk for years. And then if you need to do a dedicated cut, you could do one cut. But again, it's a slow process. And if you're not going to do the things that you have to do to get there quicker, you're going to make that process dramatically slower. You're going to make that process dramatically slower. And I'm not saying that to make guys get fat, because everyone says, oh, you want people to bulk, you want them to be fat. Well, no, I want them to reach their goals. And if you're listening to some of these clowns out here who have never trained drug-free, never coached drug-free lifters, yeah, they'll tell you, oh yeah, you can stay 10% body fat year-round and make all types of gains. Yeah, if you want to take 4 years to do what you could have done in 1, 5 years to do what you could have done in 1, and yeah, it really will be that slow. It will be that slow. And keeping in mind that once you finish noob gains, muscle growth is going to be a slow process. And if you make it slower because you aren't willing to do things correctly, don't expect to put up big numbers, okay? Unless you are that rare genetic freak. But even then, that person, if they focused on gaining more muscle, would still be stronger. They would be even more freakishly strong. So perspective. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.